Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. This time we're diving headfirst into the world of cognitive assessment, and specifically a tool called the Kaufman Assessment Battery for Children, second edition.
Better known as the KABC-II.
Exactly, the KABC-II. And, we've got some juicy excerpts here from the Essentials of KABC-II assessment book, so we're going to unpack how this test can help us understand a child's cognitive strengths and weaknesses. And I think
It's super fascinating how this test gets at that stuff.
yeah, so maybe we can just start with what I is the KABC-II. I mean, it's labeled as an intelligence test, right? But it sounds like it's way more than just like an IQ score.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So the KABC-II, it's an individually administered intelligence test, and it's for children aged 3 to 18 years. But it really goes beyond just giving you a single number.
Right.
It's all about creating a detailed profile of a child's cognitive abilities.
So almost like a cognitive fingerprint for each child.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that makes the KABC-II so unique is that it actually has this dual theoretical foundation. So it's combining Luria's neuropsychological model, which is looking at how the brain processes information,
Okay.
with the Cattell-Horn-Carroll theory, which is like a hierarchical model of intelligence.
Okay, so two different theories. How does that even work?
Well, you can think of it this way, like Luria's model gives us the hardware of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's the nuts and bolts of the brain.
Uh-huh.
Well, the Cattell-Horn-Carroll theory provides the software, like the different types of intelligence and how they all relate to each other.
I like that analogy. So it's like the KABC-II is a powerful computer that can analyze both the hardware and indeed the software of a child's mind.
Exactly. And because of this like dual approach, the KABC-II,
Mm.
it can be used in so many different ways.
Mhm.
And it gives us a much more comprehensive and flexible way to understand a child's cognitive abilities.
And speaking of updates, this test actually replaced an older version, right? The original KABC.
Right.
So what kind of updates did they make?
So they incorporated a ton of new research, and they updated the subtest to make them even more effective at measuring a child's abilities. So it's like they took an already amazing tool
Yeah.
and they just made it even better.
Okay, so we've got this really theoretically sophisticated test, but I'm kind of curious, what's it actually like to take the KABC-II? I mean, are we talking like pop quizzes and stressful exams or?
No, not at all.
Okay.
The KABC-II is designed to be really engaging and even fun for kids. And they've got two different batteries, the core battery and the expanded battery.
Okay, two batteries. So what's the difference there?
So the core battery is like the basic package, if you will,
Okay.
while the expanded battery includes additional subtests that give us an even more comprehensive view of the child's cognitive abilities.
Got it. So it's like you're choosing between the standard model and the deluxe model of a car,
Correct.
depending on how much detail you need.
Exactly. And one of the coolest features, I think, of the KABC-II is something called the nonverbal scale.
Yeah, the nonverbal scale, that really caught my eye when I was reading through the materials. So what's so special about that?
Well, it allows us to assess children who might have, hearing impairments or limited English skills or other communication challenges.
Right.
So you can imagine a child who's brilliant, but they struggle to express themselves verbally. The nonverbal scale allows their strengths to really shine through.
Oh, that's so cool. So it's like removing the language barrier and allowing kids to show their intelligence in a way that makes sense for them.
Exactly. It's about making sure that every child has a fair chance to really show what they're capable of. And the KABC-II actually goes even further and offers something called out-of-level testing.
Out-of-level testing. So what is that?
So that basically means that we can adjust the difficulty of the test to make sure it's appropriate for that child's developmental stage. We don't want the child to be bored because it's too easy, but we also don't want them to get frustrated because it's too difficult.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot where the child is challenged but not totally overwhelmed.
Yeah, the goal is to really get the most accurate and meaningful information about that child's cognitive abilities.
This is all incredibly insightful, but I'm really curious to see how this connects to real-world applications. We're not just measuring some abstract idea of intelligence here, right?
No, not at all. The KABC-II, it's a really powerful tool for helping us understand how children learn best and identify any challenges that they might be facing, and then use that information to support them in reaching their full potential.
I like that. And the book talks a lot about the importance of the scale profile, not just a global score. So can you explain what that is and why is it so important?
Yeah, definitely. So the scale profile, you can think of it like a map of the child's cognitive landscape. It shows us their peaks and valleys, their strengths and their weaknesses across a whole range of cognitive abilities.
So instead of just getting a single number like an IQ score, we're getting this whole picture of how a child's mind works.
Exactly. And that's why the scale profile is so much more valuable than just an overall score like the FCI or the MPI. It gives us a much richer understanding of the child's unique cognitive profile.
Okay, I'm with you there. But what about individual subtest scores? How do those fit into the overall picture?
So you can think of subtest scores as like individual pieces of a puzzle
Okay.
on their own. They don't tell us much, but when we put them all together, they create this much larger and more meaningful picture, which is the scale profile.
Gotcha. So the magic happens when we zoom out and look at the whole picture, not just the individual pieces.
Precisely. It's about seeing how all those different cognitive abilities work together to create that child's unique cognitive profile.
Wow, my mind is blown a little bit here. I can already see how this test can be used in so many different ways. And speaking of ways, one thing that really jumped out at me was how the KABC-II is used to identify learning disabilities. So can we dive into that a bit more?
Oh, absolutely. The KBC-II is a really valuable tool for understanding how learning disabilities manifest in different children.
Mhm.
It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of situation.
Right.
And this test helps us to see the nuance.
I'm all ears. Let's explore some of those specific applications and see how the KABC-II can actually help us help these kids.
Sounds good. Let's start with hearing impairment. I was really fascinated by how the KBC-II can help us understand the cognitive strengths of children who are deaf or hard of hearing.
Yeah, that was a big aha for me too. It's so easy to think about what these kids are missing out on, but the KABC-II really helps us focus on what they can do.
Exactly. And the nonverbal scale, it's a real game changer in this regard.
Right.
It really levels the playing field and allows these children to show us their cognitive abilities without, being limited by those language-based tests.
Right. It's like we're finally giving them a chance to show us how their minds work on their own terms.
Yeah, exactly. And this is not just about fairness. It's about getting a more accurate and complete picture of a child's cognitive abilities.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm totally with you there. Now, what about speech and language disorders? I'm guessing the KEBT2 can be really helpful there as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Think about a child who's struggling to communicate verbally. The KABC-II can help us figure out if their challenges are stemming from, difficulties with auditory processing or verbal expression, or even, broader cognitive skills.
So it's not just about identifying a speech delay, for example, but understanding the underlying cognitive reasons behind it.
Exactly. And this kind of nuanced information is crucial for speech therapists and educators. It helps
Yeah.
them develop targeted interventions that address the root of the problem, not just the symptoms.
Right, so we're being cognitive detectives using the KABC-II to uncover the clues that will help us help the child.
I love that analogy. And speaking of cognitive detectives, let's talk about ADHD for a second. Seems like everyone is talking about ADHD these days. And I've always wondered how a test like this can help disentangle ADHD from other behavioral issues. Can you walk me through that? Yeah, that's a really important point because a lot of kids get misdiagnosed with ADHD. Their behavior might look similar on the surface, but the KABC-II really helps us to see what's happening beneath the surface, in the child's cognitive processes.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, the assessment of executive function and working memory, and you combine that with those qualitative indicators we talked about earlier, it provides a really rich picture of the child's cognitive strengths and challenges.
Oh, yeah, those behavioral observations during the test can be so insightful.
Absolutely. They give us clues about the child's attention, their impulsivity, their ability to regulate their behavior. And, when we combine those observations with the KABC-II's cognitive measures, we get a much more, nuanced and accurate understanding of whether or not ADHD is actually at play.
So it's not about slapping a label on a child, but really about understanding the specific cognitive mechanisms that are driving their behavior.
Exactly. And this kind of individualized approach is so important for effective treatment planning. We can tailor interventions to target those specific areas of weakness and help the child develop those skills they need to succeed.
This all makes so much sense. It's really about seeing the whole child, not just a diagnosis now. I know we've been focusing a lot on these specific clinical applications, but the book also talks about how the KABC-II can help us understand learning disabilities more broadly. So can we talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's one of the areas where the KBC-II really shines. It's all about identifying a child's specific cognitive strengths and weaknesses, which is crucial for understanding their learning profile and, tailoring educational interventions accordingly.
Can you give us an example of how this might play out, in a real world scenario? I'm thinking about all those kids who are struggling in school, and I'm really eager to see how this test can make a real difference in their lives.
Sure. So let's say we have a child who's having a tough time with reading the KABC-II. Can help us figure out if those challenges are due to difficulties with phonological processing, or visual memory, or even broader language-based skills. And that kind of information is like gold for educators.
Right, because it helps them select the right interventions and accommodations to support that child's unique learning needs.
Exactly. It's about moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach and really customizing the learning experience to fit each child's cognitive fingerprint.
That is incredible. It sounds like the KABC-II can really be a game changer for kids with learning disabilities.
It can be incredibly empowering, both for the child and for the educators who are working with them. And the KABC-II's applications don't stop at reading. It can also help us understand challenges in math and written expression as well.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. I'm guessing those areas also tap into this complex interplay of cognitive skills. So how does the KABC-II help us untangle those complexities?
Well, let's take math, for example. Imagine a child who's struggling with geometry. The KABC-II can help us determine if their difficulties stem from weaknesses in visual spatial processing or working memory or sequential reasoning.
So instead of just saying, oh, this child is bad at math, we can say this child needs help with their visual spatial skills. That's a huge difference.
Exactly. And once we understand those underlying cognitive factors, then we can target interventions much more effectively. For example, a child who struggles with visual spatial skills might benefit from manipulatives or visual aids or other hands-on activities.
It's all about finding the right tools to unlock their potential.
Precisely. And the same goes for written expression. Think about all the different cognitive processes involved in writing. There's planning, organization, working memory, language skills, and so much more.
Wow, that's a lot to juggle. No wonder so many kids struggle with writing. So how does the KABC help us understand those challenges?
Well, it helps us pinpoint the specific cognitive areas that might be contributing to a child's writing difficulties. So, for example, a child with poor planning and organizational skills might have trouble structuring their writing, while a child with weak working memory might, lose track of their ideas as they write.
So it's not just about identifying what they're struggling with, but why.
Exactly. And that understanding is essential for providing effective interventions.
Right.
We might suggest graphic organizers or outlining strategies or other tools to help a child with planning and organization, or we might work on memory strategies to help a child who struggles with working memory. It's all about meeting the child where they are and giving them the support they need to succeed.
I am loving this conversation. We've covered so much ground already, from the theoretical foundations of the KABC-II to its applications in all these different areas. But before we wrap things up, I have to ask about one more thing. The potential for cultural bias, even though the KABC-II is designed to be culturally fair. I'm wondering how we can be sure that it's truly measuring a child's abilities and not just reflecting their cultural background.
That is a really important question, and it's something that we need to be very mindful of when using any kind of assessment. It's true that the KABC-II has been carefully normed across diverse populations and includes features like the nonverbal scale to minimize cultural bias. However, we can never assume that any test is completely immune to cultural influences.
So what can we do to make sure that we're using the KABC-II responsibly and interpreting the results in a way that's fair to every child?
Well, that's where the expertise of the examiner comes in. A skilled and culturally competent examiner can recognize potential cultural influences and adjust their interpretation of the results accordingly. And they can also, consider other sources of information about the child, like their background, their experiences, their learning style, to really get a more complete picture.
Right. This reminds me of something we talked about earlier, the importance of seeing the whole child, not just a PEST score.
Exactly. The KABC-II, it's a powerful tool, but it's just one piece of the puzzle, and it's up to us to use it responsibly, ethically, and in a way that benefits every child.
Okay, I'm feeling so much more informed about the KABC and all of its nuances. Before we move on, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on this assessment and its role in helping children reach their full potential.
I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that the KABC-II isn't just about measuring intelligence. It's about understanding how a child's mind works, their strengths, their challenges, and ultimately how to best support their learning and development.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. It really is about empowering children and the people who care for them.
And, speaking of empowerment, I think it's important to circle back to something that's been kind of weaving through our conversation, this idea that, test scores, while valuable, they should never define a child. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, how we can ensure that assessments like the KABC-II are used responsibly and ethically so that they're really serving the best interests of children.
Yeah, that's a huge point. And I think comes down to a few key things. First, we need to remember that the KABC-II, like any assessment, it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Mhm.
It gives us valuable information about a child's cognitive abilities, but it doesn't tell the whole story.
Right. It's like we've been saying, we need to see the whole child, not just the test score. Yeah.
Exactly. And that means considering, all those other factors that contribute to a child's success and well-being. Things like motivation, creativity, resilience, social emotional intelligence. These qualities might not show up on a test, but they're just as important, if not more so in the long run.
Absolutely. And I think that leads to the second key point,
Okay.
the importance of using the KABC-II to support, not limit a child's potential.
Yeah, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? The KABC-II shouldn't be used to label children or put them in boxes. It should be used to understand their unique strengths and challenges and to create individualized learning plans that help them thrive.
Exactly. The goal is to help children reach their full potential,
Mm.
whatever that may look like for them. And, that brings us to, I think, the third key point, collaboration.
Collaboration, tell me more.
I think the most effective use of the KABC-II happens when everyone involved in a child's life, the parents, the educators, the therapists, everyone is working together, sharing information and insights to create a really holistic plan that supports that child's needs.
Right. I love that it takes a village, right? We can't just rely on the test results alone. We need to combine those insights with the knowledge and expertise of everyone who knows and cares for that child.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. When we work together, we can use the KABC-II as a powerful tool for understanding, supporting, and empowering children. It becomes a springboard for meaningful conversations and collaborative decision-making.
This has been such an eye-opening journey. I feel like we've gone from this kind of surface level understanding of the KABC-II to a much deeper appreciation for its nuances and complexities.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure exploring this with you, and I hope our listeners are walking away with a renewed sense of wonder about the power of cognitive assessment and its potential to unlock the unique brilliance within each child.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the KABC-II. Remember, it's not just about scores. It's about understanding, supporting, and empowering children on their unique learning journeys. Thanks for joining us.